Okay, folks, it's time for some more creator feedback for Dinoking #1. Creator, writer, and artist of Dinoking #1 is one Liam Gray from Australia. And just as he live streamed my first review of Dinoking #1, he also live streamed my last review, The King of Comicsgate Kings. Now, thankfully, this time he didn't take the live stream private after making it, so I'm actually going to have the chance to respond to it point by point where I think a response is necessary. And a response is definitely necessary for those portions where I definitely screwed up. So you will be hearing at times me admitting my mistakes. Now, before we begin, there are some things I need you to know. For one thing, I will not be quoting Liam from his videos verbatim, word for word, in other words. One reason for this is that quoting Liam verbatim would necessarily require I add all the fluff words, for example, like, you know, etc., that people normally use while speaking off the cuff. Also, it's common for people not to repeat names and events while speaking, so quoting Liam verbatim might cause his meaning to be unclear. For example, Liam might say, when he's doing this thing here, instead of when Kaiji is hoeing the cabbage. In cases where generalizations like these happen, I'm going to use whatever words are necessary to make Liam's meaning clear. Next, I will attempt to read Liam's words using his approximate voice and accent. This is not intended as mockery. People who have watched my videos in the past know that I have approximated other creators' voices before, Ethan Van Sciver's voice being the one I've likely imitated the most. One major reason I'm doing this is to make sure you understand when it is not me talking. The other major reason is, if I did all these readings in my own voice, you would likely get bored. In my slide where I relate the story so far, Liam took issue with this particular sentence. The young man overhears the children and approaches them, wondering aloud whether they could be monsters. Liam replied, I guess I should have made it a bit clearer. In the original version of the script, I had a sort of glow around Kaiji's head to indicate he's using telepathy to read minds, but I thought, no, I'll keep it subtle. I guess it wasn't obvious enough for Mike, but when Kaiji approaches the children to ask them if they're monsters, he was sort of repeating what they were thinking about him. It's why his sentences are staggered. He's trying to figure out what's going on. For example, he says, are you enemies? Because the children are thinking, we're in danger. Now, my problem with Liam's rebuttal is that he frames it in the sense of subtle versus obvious. I'm casting it in the frame of not there versus there. The scene starts with the child stepping on a branch, alerting Kaiji to the children's presence, and Kaiji says, this food is mine. Why are you here? Why are you hiding? Are you enemies? Are you monsters? Now, as you can see, there's nothing on this page that would indicate he's saying things that are in the children's mind. It would be entirely appropriate if these were his own thoughts. So how are we supposed to know he's thinking their thoughts? Now imagine that Kaiji had said this instead after the child breaks the branch. Oh no, did he hear us? We'd better hide. He could be an enemy. He might even be a monster. So then we know that it's the children who are thinking these thoughts. Either that or he's mocking what they might be thinking. We never get a clue, the way Liam wrote it, that he's speaking any thoughts that are in their head. The next point of contention is over the word Amnesian, which I said could be the word amnesiac. Liam responded, did you Google Amnesian? Yes, of course I Googled Amnesian. And the search engine thought I misspelled it too. I got a whole list of entries for amnesia. And like the search engine, why wouldn't I think you just misspelled the word? You misspelled cabbage, you misspelled period, and don't even get me started on your lack of apostrophe game. By the way, if you're wondering why John Delarose scored higher than you, it's because he doesn't get the small stuff wrong. You could have increased your score probably by a full point just by not screwing up spelling, grammar, and punctuation so many times. Getting back to the point, did I Google Amnesian? Yes, I did. But what if Liam meant use Google specifically? So I went to google.com and I got the same list of results, but I also got an AI overview that said amnesic or amnesian refers to a person experiencing or characterized by amnesia, which is a condition where there is a loss of memory, either total or partial, often caused by brain injury or other factors. Okay, so the word amnesian actually exists. The problem is, it means a person, which means that amnesian is a noun, not an adjective. So to say the Amnesian hero is like saying the goof clown. These are not adjectives. You need to use the adjective forms. But as usual, my OCD would not let go and I had to do an even deeper dive into the internet, where of course I found out that the internet is a far stranger place than even I had known before, because there is a multiplicity and plurality wiki for people who suffer from multiple personality disorder. And on one of those pages, we have the Amnesian Protector. Amnesian Protector is a headmate role that describes a headmate who fronts to facilitate forgetting bad memories. They may or may not be aware of this role. So amnesian actually can be used as an adjective, right? Well, yeah, if you allow some random guy on Tumblr to rewrite the dictionary for you, like letting the inmates run the asylum, you do know that most people do not have an intimacy with multiple personality disorder, right? If you ask most comic book readers and moviegoers, the closest they've ever come to multiple personality disorder is by reading The Incredible Hulk or by watching M. Night Shyamalan's movie Split. Most people never had reason to geek out on multiple personality disorder, say the way I geeked out on science back in the day. In 8th grade, I learned that hydrogen had multiple forms. You had normal hydrogen with a proton and an electron, but you also had variants like tritium, where the proton is accompanied by 2 neutrons. I thought that was so interesting that back when I was such a geek as to run games for Doctor Who, I actually constructed an adventure in which this fact played a major role. It involved energy creatures that ate the extra neutrons off of the hydrogen atoms. Now, when I had my friend run through the game, seeing how he was in the same science class I was, of course, he had no clue because he wasn't the total nerd that I was. He was a normal person in comparison. And that's when I learned a very important truth. Sometimes a fact that is interesting to you is completely irrelevant to normal people. Take, for example, the existence of any such thing as an Amnesian protector, which, by the way, Kaiji isn't. He's repressed his memories, sure, but that doesn't mean he's an entirely different personality. He's just the same personality with repressed memories. For Kaiji to be an Amnesian protector headmate, he'd have to exist as a separate persona in addition to his original persona. What we see later in the book is a Kaiji who gets his memories back, not a different person entirely. Liam also didn't like my objection to calling Kaiji a hero. My objection is based in the fact that as a mystery character whom we have just encountered for the first time, who hasn't done anything to make him worthy of the label, there's no reason to jump the gun and call him a hero yet. Liam said, "You wouldn't be saying don't call your protagonist a hero if Stan Lee wrote Dinoking #1. This is a superhero book. How many opening narrations of Amazing Spider-Man, Incredible Hulk, or Fantastic Four talk about them being heroes?" Well, not the first issues, where we're introduced to these characters, but I wondered, what actually were the opening narrations of those books? Our introduction to the Hulk comes on the cover of Hulk #1, the strangest man of all time. Is he man or monster, or is he both? That doesn't exactly give us the idea that he's a hero. Likewise, the opening narration from the first page. Half man, half monster, the mighty Hulk thunders out of the night to take his place among the most amazing characters of all time. But there's nothing in there about his being a hero. The opening scene of the Fantastic Four is just as enigmatic. Here they are, Dr. Reed Richards, Ben Grimm, Susan Storm, Johnny Storm, and a big cloud saying, "The Fantastic Four." And we get these panels saying, "With the sudden fury of a thunderbolt, a flare is shot into the sky over Central City. 3 awesome words take form, as if by magic, and a legend is born." And the cops are confused, nobody knows what this means, and we get the next caption, "Above all the hubbub and excitement, one strange figure holds a still smoking flare gun. One strange man who is somehow more than just a man, for he is the leader of the Fantastic Four." And then Stan and Jack introduce us in various ways to the 4 characters who make up the Fantastic Four and showing off their powers. In the final scene where they all come together, the caption asks, "Who is this unbelievable stranger who has saved the Human Torch?" And the final caption says, "In fact, who are all 4 of these strange and astonishing humans? How did they become what they are? What mystic quirk of fate brought them together to form the awe-inspiring group known as the Fantastic Four?" And throughout all of this, we still do not have any indication that these characters are supposed to be heroes. The only thing that gives us any such indication is the cover of Fantastic Four #1, and that's just because they're fighting a giant monster. If they're fighting a giant monster, they're probably the heroes. The cover of Dinoking is nothing like the cover of Fantastic Four #1. IG isn't fighting some obvious enemy, he's just basically showing off his human and dinosaur halves, as well as his intermediate form. It's much more an Incredible Hulk cover than it is a Fantastic Four cover, which means we get no indication as to whether he's a hero or not. Despite the costume and obvious superhero motif, the cover of Amazing Fantasy 15, which Eric July famously didn't know introduced Spider-Man, is also cagey about calling the new character a hero. Now, the interior in this case kinda does give the game away. Like costume heroes? But even then, it's cagey. As you know, costume heroes are a dime a dozen, but we think you may find our Spider-Man just a bit different. which leaves the door open for him to be, I don't know, something else entirely. And there's another reason, by the way, why Stan chose to open by asking, do you like costume heroes? It's because Amazing Fantasy used to be Amazing Adult Fantasy, and it was not a superhero book. The protagonists in these books were usually normal human beings who would encounter monsters, aliens, robots, mystical threats. By and large, costume superheroes were completely absent from this book. Instead, the stories in there had a sci-fi or horror basis and usually ended with some sort of twist. So when Stan said, you like costume heroes? He's informing his readers that the space that they're entering is a different space than to which they're used to. But he's also cluing them in that it's not going to be that much of a departure because there will be a twist. And if anyone's familiar with the origin of Spider-Man, you know what twist I'm talking about. If you don't, go find yourself a reprint somewhere. It's so worth it. So when Liam says, you wouldn't be saying don't call your protagonist a hero if Stan Lee wrote Dinoking #1, he's actually right. I wouldn't be saying that because Stan Lee would never make that kind of mistake. Liam also protests, this is a superhero book, but where is that in evidence? We're only a few pages into the book, there's been no superheroism on Kaiji's part that we've seen, and all of the front matter that I've covered didn't have any reference to Kaiji being a hero. But then I thought, oh wait, I did not read that word from the author, did I? Maybe I should now. So I did, and look what it says. Will Kaiji save the world, or ultimately will he be the one to destroy it? You'll have to read to find out. Oh, that's not vague at all. By the way, the comic goes there. The next thing that Liam took serious issue with was by calling Anakin Skywalker a complex character, someone who defied being labeled as either a hero or villain because he could occupy either of those roles during his career. Liam protested, Anakin Skywalker was introduced as Darth Vader, arguably one of the most simply iconic evil characters there is, someone who is inherently villainous. How is Anakin complicated? Anakin is a villain. Even the prequels show his decline. He's evil throughout the entire course of those films. Really? He's evil throughout the entire course of those films? He was evil at the end of The Phantom Menace when he was 10 years old and commandeered a starship to shoot down the droids that were attacking the Queen and her retinue? He was evil as a Jedi fighting the Sith Lord Count Dooku in Attack of the Clones? He was evil in Revenge of the Sith when he and Obi-Wan Kenobi took on General Grievous? By the way, between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, there was an entire Clone Wars cartoon where he was so much the hero of the series that voice actor Sam Witwer, who played the voice of Darth Maul, the Emperor, and others within the Clone Wars series, and who also famously voiced Starkiller in the Force Unleashed video games, had this to say about the proper viewing order for introducing Star Wars to young children. For kids, start with the Clone Wars. Get them used to what that world is, and more importantly, get them used to who Anakin Skywalker is. And then show them Episode 4, and Obi-Wan's like, Darth Vader killed your father, Anakin Skywalker. Then the kids are gunning for Darth Vader. They haven't made the connection yet. So then, when you go to Episode 5, you get, I am your father. And then the kids are mind blown, because they liked the guy, they mourned his loss, they went after the guy that killed him to find out that's the same guy. Then show them the prequels. So according to Sam Witwer, who famously is one of the few people who could out-geek Dave Filoni at Star Wars lore, the first thing you do when you introduce children to Star Wars is start with the Clone Wars and get them used to who Anakin Skywalker is. Why? Because Anakin Skywalker is the hero of that whole series. Then you move into the original trilogy, and then the kids are mind blown to find out that Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader are one and the same. Why? Because Darth Vader is evil, Anakin Skywalker is the good guy. So I hope I answered your question as to how Anakin Skywalker is complicated. Now we come to the infamous kids jumping on Kaiji scene, and oh my god did I take crap for this one. Because my position was, I hate these kids now because they jumped on this guy so hard that they practically injured him. And this after he had the kindness to walk them home from where they were in the dangerous forest. I basically don't care what happens to these children now. To which Liam replied, it's just a couple of kids laughing and jumping on him while he's asleep to wake him up. That's what kids do. That's normal. Imagine their mother's in the other room and she said to them, go wake up Kaiji. They jump on him as a joke. They're being mischievous, but it's harmless. And Liam was totally not alone in thinking that. Several other people who I discussed this with also thought that I was going overboard. This didn't look terrible at all to them, which really left me perplexed. Why is it they don't see the same thing that I did? And then I realized, if this is the only part of the scene you know, then this looks completely innocent. It looks like Kaiji's lying in a couch, and at worst, the kids just jumped off the back of the couch onto him. But that's not what happened. These kids jumped off of a cabinet onto him as he was lying on the floor. Now, I'm assuming this is a standard Japanese house where the roof is 8 feet tall, so it looks like these kids are 6 feet high. And if you factor in the average weights of a 6-year-old Japanese girl and a 9-year-old Japanese boy, which are 45 pounds and 65 pounds respectively, you're going to get a couple of crushing weights on this guy, dropped from 6 feet up. By the way, bonsai is spelled B-A-N-Z-A-I. So when these kids land on Kaiji, they're landing with their full body weight from a 6-foot drop. I don't know about you, but I don't want a 45-pound weight and a 65-pound weight falling on me from a 6-foot drop, especially not on my nuts. And neither did any of the people to whom I showed the rest of the scene. They all looked at this and said, "Oh, we didn't realize this." Then they understood my point. Next, we come to this panel where the mother Ren says to Kaiji, "It's excellent you're taking so quickly to the chopsticks, Kaiji. You're a very fast learner, but it's impolite to read our minds without permission." Now, let me say that while I did find a missing comma and a comma that should have been a period, I'm embarrassed I did not catch the missing apostrophe here. That's because the big fish in this panel is this last sentence, "But it's impolite to read our minds without permission." Seriously? You thought his using chopsticks was a function of his having read your mind to learn how to use them? Why not simply assume that he knew how to use them before, and this was one of the things that he didn't forget? After all, the amnesiacs in Western stories still generally know how to use spoons, knives, and forks. To which Liam replied, "Kaiji had nothing. Who Kaiji was before didn't know how to use chopsticks from Japan. He didn't know anything about Japan because he's a native of this planet, Orm. The setting as Planet Orm was established in the opening paragraphs of the previously in Xenotype page at the front of the book. I don't know how this is overlooked." The absolutely amazing thing about everything Liam says here is that none of it is in evidence from the comic. Kaiji had nothing. How do we know that? We can't look inside his head and know what he does and doesn't have. How do we know he's such a blank slate? Who Kaiji was before didn't know how to use chopsticks from Japan. Okay, Japan's not the only country that uses chopsticks, you know. What if Kaiji belonged to a colony from China, or Thailand, or Vietnam, or Korea, or any of the other Asian countries that use chopsticks? He didn't know anything about Japan. Again, how are we supposed to know that? What if the Japanese language was the only thing he didn't know? Or what if the fact that he said arigato meant that he did know some Japanese? Because he's a native of this planet Om. Again, how do we know that? Why couldn't Kaiji be just another Earth settler or descendant of Earth settlers? We don't know. We don't know what Ren is, for that matter, who comes from some other city on the planet. Didn't Rem freak out when she saw that Kaiji's clothes were from Alabaster? I just assumed Alabaster is some other city or town or clan or something from the planet. How are we supposed to know that Kaiji is a native of Orm? As for establishing the setting as planet Orm in the previously in Xenotype page, oh, you mean that front matter you told me I didn't have to read? You can't have it both ways, you know. You can't put essential information in the front matter and then tell people you don't need to read the front matter. Here's the famous panel where Kaiji reveals that he's taken away his own memory. And that's when I said, "Psycho!" Liam said, "Psycho? He's literally sitting there with a polite smile on his face." Yes, because we've never seen a polite smile on a psycho before. He likes the family he's found. He likes their food. He likes it better in their home because it's more comfortable. Look at his eyes. There's no tension or aggression in him, and he doesn't like being mad. How is that psychotic in any way? Does any of this convey psychosis? Is this just an intentional attempt to get some sort of reaction out of me? How is it psychotic that a guy lobotomized himself, or at least deliberately repressed or erased his own memories? I mean, honestly, I think Liam might just be being a little facetious here and saying that psycho should actually mean psychotic in the literal sense of having broken with reality. I mean, the guy broke with the reality of his own past, you could say. But really, in colloquial terms, to call someone psycho just means that they're mentally unwell in some way, which I think Kaiji establishes here that he most definitely is. Now, this remark by Liam really struck me as weird, and it wasn't until later in the video that I kind of understood it, so I'm going to wait until the end of the video to address this particular statement by him. Now we famously come to the scene where Rem gets eaten by the dinosaur, and I laughed because I felt the absurdity of this scene triumphed over its intended horror. And Liam said, "I don't want you to be horrified. I want you to laugh out loud and go, 'That's cool.' Do you understand?" Well, no. Not any more that you understand how a guy's admitting that he's erased his own memory might convey that he's not picture of mental health. I want to shock you, but I don't want to horrify you. That's not what Dinoking is about. This isn't my horror book. This is my ultra-violent book about giant talking dinosaurs that, if they were voiced, would speak like Freddy Krueger. Oh, Freddy Krueger of the romantic comedy franchise Nightmare on Elm Street. Oh wait, what am I saying? Not only is Nightmare on Elm Street a horror franchise, it's one of the top 10 horror franchises of all time. I want you to be surprised and startled, not horrified and scared so that you close the book and run away. Liam, I've seen all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, from the beginning to the end. The horror didn't make me run away. Horror is just the normal human emotion you experience when you see a woman get eaten by a dinosaur. In fact, it's the human emotion your own characters experience. And you don't want me to empathize with them? Apparently not, because Liam says, you laughed, right? I win. I win the review. I win. I win. I win. I did my job. I did my job. You laughed your ass off? Bingo. Job achieved. I brought joy into your life. Take that. Liam, I didn't laugh my ass off because I thought your book was funny. I laughed my ass off because this is the point at which your book became a joke. If you want to take my telling you that this is the point where I could no longer take this comic seriously as a win, go ahead. That's entirely up to you. But believe me when I say I don't mean it in that sense. In this sequence, we see Kaiji suffering from his emotions, but he never really gets the chance or is given the tools to overcome them. He just gets a flick on the head and a couple of attaboys. Liam says, he doesn't overcome his emotion. He hasn't overcome any of his emotions. Why would I want to convey that he's overcome any of his emotions? He's not over his emotions. He's not cured or fixed. He's super unstable. He's super unstable. He's a bomb. Did anyone else hear the record scratch? You just said the quiet part out loud. He's a bomb. He's super unstable. One might even say he's psycho. What was this complaint about? Here my gripe was that we're given a data dump by the pterodactyl rather than being given a visual representation of Kaiji's past. But Liam rightfully complains here. Actually, there's a flashback to his actual mother Sarixion and to some of his past. Why do you completely omit the fact that we flashback showing him as a small child? You missed his memory coming back a little bit. I did entirely forget these two flashback pages. The truly salient panels from those two pages being these. Here we have a flashback to 11 years ago on a previous occasion when Kaiji was taken in by a family, this time in the town of Alabaster. There are problems with this flashback in that the sources imply an unreliable narrator. He's being told by the pterodactyl what happened on one hand, and his own shaky memory is telling him the rest. We know at least one of the contributors to this memory has his own agenda. Also, memories can be incredibly deceptive. We also see a little tiny child Kaiji on the page. Is that really his physical form, or is that his memory's internal representation of himself? So did all this really happen? 11 years ago seems like a really long time. Too long for Rem to be freaking out the way she is. The sense of panic she conveys doesn't speak to a 10-year-old genocide. Not to mention how strange it seems that he's wearing alabaster clothing 10 years after he actually was there. Moreover, the clothes he's wearing are grown-up clothes. Why would that be if he were a child wearing child's clothing when the alabaster genocide happened? And on top of that, why does he look happy? He told us earlier in the book that remembering made him mad. That looks like a happy kid having a happy memory. And all of this is largely to say that the reason I didn't remember the flashback scene is because I felt I couldn't trust it. It didn't seem congruous with the account that Kaiji's giving of his past, and especially of his desire for the lack of a past. And also there's the fact that I had pretty much given up on the book by this point. And now we come to the point where I was confused by an advertisement, where Kaiji is saying, so long as I try, I'm exactly as strong as I need to be. Isn't that right, great survivor Saint Kaidan? Now here Liam justifiably complains, you have clipped this panel in such a way as to remove the fact that he is looking down at the children. I'm exactly as strong as I need to be, he says to the two children looking up at him, that he has his arms around in the part of the panel you've snipped out. This is why I will never again watch your channel. I appreciate the critique and you're giving it an editorial pass, but this is being supremely disingenuous. You're not even presenting my story right. You're chopping things out and skipping over things. Now Liam is correct that I did crop this panel. Here's a larger portion of the panel with some of the dialogue blanked out, and here you can clearly see that just as Liam said, Kaiji is looking down at the children. But the reason I cropped all that out is because none of that matters. The problem is the ellipsis. Kaiji is in the middle of asking a question, and the ellipsis implies that he has more to say. Otherwise, there should be a question mark here, not an ellipsis. Or at the very least, there should be a question mark after the ellipsis. To end a question in an ellipsis means the question isn't done being asked yet. That's just how English punctuation works. Statements may trail off, but even questions that trail off have a question mark at the end. Not to Liam, though, because he says, the ellipse is leading the children, whom he's looking at, to answer him. He's imparting wisdom to them the same way that their mother imparted wisdom upon him. But if that were the case, you would still need a question mark at the end of the ellipse. Sorry, Liam, I don't make the rules. You just break the rules. Like when you associate dots and dashes together, the same way you associate dots and dashes multiple times in the book, including across a page break, where you also excoriated me for not showing the pages. It doesn't matter whether the images flow, the punctuation doesn't flow, because punctuation doesn't work like this. And the child's "we've got to get out of here quickly" is no response to the question. So since I couldn't connect the question to the child's next words, I found myself connecting it to an even wronger place. Now, I did mention this is a larger portion of the panel. It's still not the full panel. This is the full panel. And what you might miss, as I most certainly did, is the word Oni-chan, which I missed because not only is it blended in with the squiggles of Kaiji's shirt and positioned like a Taco Bell employee's name badge, but it's also down and to the left of what I thought was the final dialogue balloon on the page. And when I saw that Oni-chan there, I thought, oh, what if that is the response that Liam was talking about, the response that Kaiji was trying to lead the kids in? But then I realized that's no response, really. That's certainly not answering his question, and it's not even really sufficient to interrupt him. So it's still correct for the reader to think that there's probably more to be said. Now, after I'm done addressing that ad snafu, I give Liam a couple of rules about ad placement. Namely, number 1, always put your ads on the right side of the book. And number 2, make sure that the art, dialogue, and captions from the bottom of the left side of the book facing the ad cannot possibly flow into the ad. To which Liam replies, so don't surprise your audience with an ad? Really? I like surprising my audience. Whoa, what's this? That's fun. But it's not fun if the surprise confuses you or breaks the mood of the book. Put the ad on the right side of the book, and the reader has the choice of looking at that first, or the reader can ignore it and just continue with the story. But if you throw the ad on the left side of the book, the reader has no choice but to be interrupted by the ad. Moreover, you don't want your reader going, whoa, what's this? Because he or she read the ad as part of the story. I'm not saying don't put ads in your books. I'm just saying don't put them in places where they're likely to confuse the reader. Now we can finally get back to this remark that I passed over. When I was addressing the fact that Kaiji's admission of his self-memory excision made him seem like a psycho, the last question Liam asked was, is this just an intentional attempt to get some sort of reaction out of me? And I felt like this was weird because it seemed like he was almost taking this personally, as if I was making an attack on him rather than on the way he was writing his character. But then I got more towards the end of the video, and I learned this from Liam. Dinoking #1 is deeply based on my own lived experience. Growing up, I came from Southside motorcycle gangs. I lived in drug dens my whole life. I'd never had a family dinner. I'd only ever seen one on television. Then I was taken in by a Christian family and lived with them for a while. They took me in and showed me goodness. So when Kaiji finds a family and they take him in, I wanted to capture my experience and honor it in the pages of the book. This was a beautiful and meaningful experience I wanted to share. Finding this out about Liam's past and about how it relates to the scene made his remark understandable. Now, he doesn't go so far as to claim that he is Kaiji, but Kaiji's experience is very much based on his own. And for me to label Kaiji a psycho in this case, and for me to lambaste Ren for taking in Kaiji under these circumstances, it must have seemed to Liam like a repudiation of his own personal experience when a Christian family took him in. But I would argue that there are two substantive differences between Kaiji's situation and the one that Liam found himself in. Number 1, Liam didn't have self-inflicted amnesia. The people who took him in knew him and knew what they were dealing with. Kaiji, on the other hand, is literally telling Rem, there are things in my past so bad I had to make myself forget them, which automatically raises the question, what if those memories come back? Like Liam himself said, he's super unstable. He's a bomb. The other substantial difference is that Liam was taken in by a Christian family, whereas there is no hint of any religion in the Shiratori household. The reason that makes a significant difference is because when you believe that so long as you're obedient to Jesus, then when you die you'll be taken to heaven no matter what, that gives you an incentive to do Jesus-y things like take a seriously troubled young man into your home. Even if he axe murders you, you go to heaven, so you win even if you lose. But without any such basis in the Shiratori household, one has to question the wisdom of Rems taking in a super unstable young man like Kenji, especially when there are small children in the household. Rem's philosophy doesn't even rise to the level of a Jordan Peterson short, and her cognitive therapy methods. Ooh, lad. In a nutshell, Rem does not seem like the person who ought to be taking a bomb into her house, especially when sometimes the bomb goes off. And even though it wasn't directly Kenji's fault, in Rem's case, it kinda did. Hopefully this is the last I'll have to say on Dinoking number 1, but I do want to leave Liam with one pro tip. Do not live stream reviews of your book, and I say this as someone who has written stories and subjected them for criticism. When you first get criticism, the natural reaction of any writer is to say, "You're crazy, my story's perfect just the way it is." It isn't until you've had time to think it over and think it over more and let it gnaw at you that you realize that the person trying to give you advice actually has a point. The problem with live streaming your reaction to a review then is that basically everything that's going to spill out of you is the vitriol of that initial reaction of saying, no, my story is perfect, there's nothing wrong with it, the problem is entirely you. But that's almost never really the case. More often than not, you'll realize that there are certain points that the person made that you actually do think are worthy of incorporation into your book or at least into your next book. And what you don't want to do is lock yourself into your initial reaction in front of your fans, because then you'll realize, oh, if I actually apply these changes and somebody notices, I'm going to look like a hypocrite for having resisted in the first place. And then you'll have to decide between whether your story will look right or you will look right. I'm Mike Bartica. Thank you for watching. Please do subscribe so that you will get notified of the next review, which may or may not be The Great War of Separation number 1. I might be doing Yaira number 2 instead. I have not quite decided yet. I might do Yaira number 2 first, just because for some reason it looks like they're being cagey about their cover reveal for Yaira number 3. I'm starting to think I should at least go ahead and read Yaira number 2 before I get spoiled on that cover reveal. So we shall see. Maybe I'll read both books and then I'll go ahead and give a review on one of them. Maybe there will be so little to say about either of them that I can combine them into one review. Wouldn't that be great? I could actually get ahead on some of these things. In any case, please do subscribe so that you will be notified of the next review, whatever it is. Once again, I am Mike Bartica. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you later.